Let me start by stating that I'm not just happy but somehow proud that we succeeded in making such a clear cut between yesterday and tomorrow. We finished the political writing systems of the Mediterranean and the Near East, and from this very minute on we'll have to talk about monotheism. That's a really sharp distinction and new start. With monotheism, it's obviously meant Judaism, Christianism, and Islam. That is to say, three religions where there is one God having created the world, but there is no goddess, and no goddesses in the plural. This is not all too true for archaeological reasons. As far as we know, in the temple in Jerusalem, up to about 600, there were not too beautiful figures of Askera, a female goddess, next to Yahweh. But later on, this Askera had to disappear. I have to treat these three religions because they are writing systems, religions based totally on the fact that they are written down, and nevertheless this fact to have been written down has unfortunately, at least in my eyes, contributed not so much to other fields. The writing down of the Homeric songs and the Greek alphabet finally led to a better understanding of the physical and the philosophical knowledge of our world. I don't want to be ideological, but I can't see in this Jewish and Christian and Muslim contributions something equivalent. Understanding very important scientific transmission and translation functions of Arabian, of Muslim scientists in Baghdad and in Toledo and Spain, which include also Jewish scientists and philosophers. But I just talked about the scripture system as such. Now I have to go through these three writing systems and religions as to the best of my knowledge. I remember that when I talked about Jesus last time before you here in Zasfi, it was the only half an hour where the whole classroom was in sheer rebellion. Everybody talked and fought and Let's see if it happens again. And now with regards the Torah, the old part of the Old Testament, the 5 books of Moses, I take my knowledge from some very influential and very discreet old American Jew who wouldn't like to have dispelled his name. He told me about his cultural socialization in Orthodox belief. All starts with the Jewish mother, because she defines the Jewish identity of the children, as you know. And the mama tries to read her children the text, but she's never sure whether she has vocalized correctly or not. She's just improvising. And that's why the Bar Mitzvah is so important for the official acceptance of young Jewish believers. In principle, they should be able to vocalize the whole Torah, but this would mean to learn the Bible by root or by heart, and so it can't be done. And the Rabbi says, I'm told, this year it will be third Moses chapters 20 to 30. And then the young boys start to learn by heart every vowel and get a silver stick into their hand, and with the silver sticks they show the consonants that they're just reading in the synagogue before the Gemeinde, before the other Jews. And whenever in vocalization occurs, there's a rumor in the synagogue, and the candidate A is thrown away or put away, and without grand ado, the candidate B takes over, and so without any error is protected. The Holy Book has been deciphered without any mishap, so to say. And after many years or even decades, this leather scroll, even if it's not never touched but only pointed to by the silver stick, has grown old and tired and is buried just like a dead human body. And the other way is the famous, is obviously the liberal way of Jewish writing and believing. This has started in Hellenistic times in Alexandria. You all know probably the story of the Septuaginta, how 72 interpreters in one and the same night produced 72 identical translations of the Torah into the Greek Septuaginta text. One of these obvious myth stressing stressing this unbelievable faith in literality of the text. It wouldn't have, in my eyes, it wouldn't have meant a great thing if there had been slight differences between these 72 versions. In the case of Homer and the Iliad and the Odyssey, there are so many versions, and nobody has ever had a problem with this. In Plato also we get Homeric hexameters, which are quite different from our canonical version. Nobody cares and nobody suffers. The second thing, probably related to this liberal Jewish faith as developed under the Greek horizon of the Hellenistic world, is some kind of re-import of science. The Semitic alphabet had been exported to Greece. In Greece, the phonetic values had been enriched by numerical values for the same signs or letters, and now this numerical system is re-imported into the Jewish culture under only in Hellenistic times. And this seems to have been the origin of the so-called Kabbalah. You have in every given biblical word, you have a possible numerical value. You can build up, for instance, the sum of digits in this number, which at the same time is a word. You can look for other words in the Torah having the same sum of digits, and then you can identify these two words as two identical attributes of God. This is some kind of mathematics. This is some kind of science, certainly, but it's no way. Sorry. It's no way out of the Holy Script. It still remains in the circle. It remains banned or fascinated or. I'm not impartial, I know. I need some pause, I think. Good occasion to put my watch on the table and organize this course against my breaking voice. Now, it's time to switch to Christianism and to Jesus of Nazareth, who, as you know, wrote just for once into the sand. And nobody has transmitted what he had written into the sand. It's okay to, but this little gesture of writing makes it clear that he was no illiterate bard or rhapsode, but living in a Hellenistic culture, that is in a culture with a heavy or strong Greek horizon. These little, probably Aramaic linguistic corner of the Near East. This was probably midway between the old Hebrew tradition on the one hand and the Greek future of this Near East on the other. And under these boundary conditions, as mathematicians would call them, I think I can answer the question Roger Waters and Pink Floyd had posed in 1982 at the beginning of their final cut. Tell me true, tell me why is Jesus crucified. My answer might not be perfect, but it has good philological foundations. We start with the cross. We forget about St. John and keep our interest to the so-called synoptic Gospels, Mark and Matthew and Luke, because they are more historically near to the facts as they can be hopefully constructed. Jesus is dying and cries. One of the few lines in the Gospels where the Hebrew is verbatim transliterated. Elohim, Elohim, lama sabachthani. My God, why did you leave me? This is classical Hebrew. This is no Aramaic slang or dialect. Second, this is a quotation from Psalm 22, verse 2, I think, which proves, third, that Jesus, in difference to his hearers on this Golgotha mountain, is able to speak and to read classical Hebrew, which, let me give a rather crude comparison. I think it would be as if somebody suddenly spoke in his own name the English of Chaucer, or the Italian of Boccaccio, or the German of Gottfried von Strasbourg. And that's why the people around the course, over these three courses, misunderstand the psalmic quotation. What does he fancy about the prophet Elias? That's what they talk between each other in their usual Aramaic dialect. The prophet Elias, they misunderstood Elohim with Elias, with the prophet, and suppose that Jesus wants to be saved by this famous chariot of Elias from the cross to the heaven. So the situation of the crucifixion can be summarized by saying it's a linguistic impasse, a linguistic problem. And to say just one thing more, and you've got a course on the Greek tragedy last week, I heard also. If you remember the end of Sophocles' last tragedy, Oedipus on Colonus, there he has suffered, he's blind and has suffered, and his sons have given him up, and Antigone stays faithfully to him. And his desire for survival diminishes step by step. And then there is this holy rain or holy also. A mixture between the temple and the meadow. And from this forbidden region of this Attic countryside, there comes a voice out of two mouths. What mouths probably once again? The two great goddesses, Megalaitei, that is Demeter and Kore, address the old king of Thebes and say, why do you hesitate? Why do you hesitate? Come to us. And he goes, and suddenly he's not blind anymore. He needs no Antigone to lead him. But he goes into this forbidden region of the countryside to the goddesses and disappears because he has been accepted, or the goddesses have heard him, have listened to him, and my God, why did you leave me? It's just the contrary. What can a man do against this linguistic problem? he can think about the readability of the Torah, of the Bible, to normal, everyday women and men, to prostitutes and so I know this Dogana, what is this in English, Nicoletta? Dogana in English?
Dogana, it's the board of the, what do you say? 1 second. The custom.
Custom people,
yeah. Yeah, you have to pass the customs when you are in the border.
I just mean all these acquaintances Jesus has made in Galilee to prostitutes and
tax collectors,
tax collectors and little under officers, and, yeah. One should bring these poor people into a situation where they could read out their Bible. How could we do this? Answer: we anticipate technical innovation the rabbis will take up to about 2 centuries later. That is all very uncertain chronologically. I'm sorry, but the archaeological basis is desperately bad. Palestine is not one of the places where people write most, or have written most. And so I've just one hint, for this hint is at the heart of Jesus' message. As you know, the Sermon of the Mountain in Matthew is the kernel of the operating system named Christianity. And it starts with the following statement. Now it's not King James's Bible verbatim, but somehow. You my listeners, you will think that I've come to abolish the law. Nothing is wronger. Here, heaven and earth will end, or dying also, before one little jot and one little horn from the script will be erased by me, so to say. What is it with this jot? Obviously, the consonant, the sign jot, and what is it about with this little horn? I've talked to many friends and scholars, German scholars and Jewish scholars, and all have tried to I felt like Hercule Poirot or Sherlock Holmes. I didn't talk to murderers or to criminals, but to false falsche Zeugen.
Witnesses.
False witnesses, yeah. Everybody tried to cover something up. that's why I got suspicious. That's okay. Matthäus 5, verse 18, I just quoted, obviously deals with two anomalies inside the Jewish Semitic alphabet. 21 consonantal letters are equally or normally big, great, and the Yod is grammatically smaller. And the Karaya, the little horn, is still smaller than the Yod. And now you have to imagine the standardization of the Hebrew alphabet in classical Hellenistic times, where the rabbis succeeded to construct a square for every sign except the Yod. You should look it up in some lexicon or under Google. And the Yod can't be caught in this pattern. And so it's just like a European apostrophe. No chance to bring it to the form of a square. So far so good. But now the word Karaya. I just know of two instantiations of this Greek word. The one you have here in Matthew, and the others in Plutarchus, where it is question of Greek diacritical signs. So my lecture of Karaya is vocalic diacritic mesoretic sign. The Yod is still something like a line, but in later rabbinic writing, little dots, 3 or 4 or 2, in defined positions inside or outside the square, give the vocalic value of this consonantal sign. Under the Greek horizon of culture in Hellenistic times, somebody introduces vocalic auxiliary signs into Bible, which is very helpful for text people and prostitutes, and very unhealthy to those who make their living out of writing and reading the Torah. Vollgrammateis, those who are able to handle the letters, these are the guys who propose to kill Jesus, because for their reading and writing capacity they get a tenth of every product of the country, and Jesus is strictly against this tense. Either people are able to read the Bible themselves, or they pay other people to do the reading for them. And as the secular power, in this case the Roman proconsul, is always positive to literacy as a tool of better governing the subjected provinces and countries. Pontius Pilatus would really like to not to crucify Jesus, but not the Jews in general. This is my thesis, but only those Jews who are inside the temple responsible for the readability of this old-fashioned classical Hebrew sign system and language system. So, and we have no rebellion against me? No total.
So Jesus was the first Martin Luther.
Yeah.
Yeah. John Wycliffe or Janus or this mention of little horn Karaya is the very first, and there is only this possible interpretation. And it's a classical case. At first they kill him, and 3 or 4 generations later the rabbis take over this principle of vocalization of the text. And this has occurred, and this is certain, and this is no speculation of mine. 3rd or 4th century of our era, the rabbis had Torah scrolls among them for professional use, where these little dots were written down. But these copies should show up to the common herd. You understand? In the synagogue, there was no idea of vocal signs. But imagine the situation that in Russian Kiev, for instance, the whole Jewish community is burned and killed, and the rabbi is killed, and the pronunciation of the words of the Torah is killed, and in a way the tradition itself has come to an end if the rabbis didn't have this little secret system of vocalic internal communication. They could barely survive this kind of pogrom. on the famous inscription on top of the cross I've already spoken yesterday. Jesus Marcellinus, next to the Orum, language of Latin, language of the army, Greek, language of the culture, and Hebrew, language of the temple bureaucracy. The only remaining question, how to stabilize this introduction of vowels into the Hebrew writing and into the Hebrew writing system. I see two possible answers. Both have been given. Only the second answer was extremely successful. First one is has occurred once again last Sunday. My birthday, by the way. I mean Pentecost. St. Peter and his friends drink some forbidden wine, and suddenly the Holy Ghost comes, or Spirit, comes into them, and they talk in tongues, glossa, and everybody understands everybody. Jews, Arabs, people from the island of Crete, people from Mesopotamia, from Egypt. You can look it up in the Acts of the Apostles, or in the Acts. There has been a very nice and very famous Greek anticipation of this Pentecostal situation. I skip to the details. I'd say that the Greek anticipation is humanly and linguistically possible. You can Americans of Texas and Tennessee and Alabama can understand each other. Okay. And in the same way, a very old and wonderful Greek hymn speaks about the young singing girls of Jesus. But Arab, Assyrian, Greek, Egyptian, Hebrew, this simply doesn't do. We can't accept impossibilities inside the Gospels. So there remains only the second answer to the vocalic survival question of Jesus. And this answer has been given, as you know, by St. Paul. If it imports to have vowels, why then why shouldn't we start by writing Greek from scratch, from the very beginning on? And St. Paul is the first Christian to write, and he wrote in Greek, in a little bit poor Greek, but nevertheless it was Greek. And the Gospels were 50 years later, and Greek too. And between Paul and the Gospels, there are there had been occurred the destruction of the temple and the destruction of Jerusalem by Vespasian and Hitler. So then, and when if Paulus writes to the Corinthians, to Gamma Mescal, the latter kills, and the Pneuma, the ghost, the breath, makes life or makes living. It's difficult to translate. I just would propose the translation: letter is tantamount to consonant, and pneuma is tantamount to vowel. And in writing vowels in letter form, we keep the spoken word even by distances of letters and Roman communication systems. When everybody reading loud, Paul's answers and prayers brings about a resurrection of this word which has given life and truth and I forgot the word. And so it is Paul and nobody else who invents or reinvents, following Ribetes, the anastasis, resurrection of the flesh, as a resurrection of the Greek vowel system inside the broken up Hebrew consonantism. I think this is very cool, without great dogmatic, problematic problems. I think we can live with it. But if you look for in the New Testament science, which is as big as this room, or as all these rooms together, taken as a library, you won't find much about this very cool and practical issue of the things. Dear listeners, now it's first hour has been achieved. Let's take 10 to 12 minutes pause. Maybe it will be helpful to give some 10 minutes to the discussion of what I try to explain, and your criticism would be most welcome.
Maybe Thomas can start.
Yes.
What you said before. It's really interesting.
I'm loving it. It seems bizarre, but fascinating. And I mentioned to you over the break, it sounds like your argument is that Jesus was a vowel. And I also mentioned over the break that the further on the construction that the early Christians came up with to explain the Trinity was very much on this vocal speech model of the phallo-logocentric Father God who speaks the Word, Jesus being the Word, and the Holy Spirit as the breath that emanates at the same time as the Word, or living speech as opposed to dead letter. And I know a few of us were talking about the way that the Christians basically recreated the same bureaucratic structure of a privileged priesthood with an illiterate masses.
And in the main languages, logos is translated as a word. Like at the beginning there was a logos.
Right.
It's translated to the word.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not as if the Jewish priests didn't have a concept of spirit or breath. Or what I'm
Ruah.
okay, my Ruah, yeah, my Hebrew is not there, but
there's wonderful chapter in Ezekiel, or how would you call it, this prophet in English? Yahweh addresses the prophet Ezekiel, and demands of him to resurrect the dead bones on a graveyard. And the prophet answers, impossible. How could I, how should I, how would I? And Yahweh, we know this, he's crazy kind of God, doesn't stop to command, and suddenly God's Ruach floats down from heaven as a sound or as a big noise, nobody knows. And all these bones acquire flesh and jump around, and the prophet has an hallucination of this resurrection, anastasis. But and it's chapter 37, I think, in Ezekiel. The chapter ends, and no reader learns whether or not these resurrected fleshes fall down again to bones, or whether they dance around. And I'd say the Ruach of Yahweh is some actuality which can't be technically transmitted, and for the simple reason that there are no vowels in the Torah. So you can't transmit the Ruach, you just can transmit the bones. And your brilliant aphorism that I reduce Jesus to a vowel, I'd say you don't. I'd like you to take this little diagram as serious as possible. You have 21 classical Hebrew consonants, all filling a certain geometrical space. You have one exceptional iota, which is about 1/8 or 1/10 in dimension. And third, you have these little dots, almost invisible dots, which somebody must have invented in order to signify vocalic values. A, E, I, O, U. Somebody must have done it. Nobody knows who it was. Jesus is the first man ever mentioning something like these diacritic vocalic signs. Martin Luther has he said that my Jesus interpretation was very German because I equalized Jesus to Luther, but Luther has in no way introduced new signifiers. But these little signifiers of the third degree are something which must have been invented, and why not think of Jesus as the inventor of all instead of being himself a vowel? Maybe somebody had preceded him, some heretic Jew in the Essenic sects or so, or some Philhellenic Jew who were in masses at the time. I could tell you stories about circumcision, for instance, and the impossibility to go to the Greek Hellenistic gymnasium being circumcised, and though the young Hebrew boys engaged physicians to remake this lust for foreskin in order to become real Hellenistic Jews. This tendency is, for good or bad reasons, not represented in our biblical history, but it's true nevertheless. Okay. And your argument, sorry, I couldn't get acoustically.
Oh, I just said when he was saying about Jesus and the vowel, I said that on the main language, logos is translated with a word.
Yeah.
At the beginning there was a word.
Mm-hmm. But this is St. John,
Yeah.
whom I excluded somehow from my interpretation. St. John is a Greek interpretation of Jesus from beginning to the end, so it wouldn't make much sense to start from his gospel. I prefer the other way around, and to show how into these so-called synoptic three gospels the
No, it was just additional
impact
comment
of the Greek.
on what he said.
Remark my stress, and I'm sorry. I could be more brilliant. If I take the crucifixion scene in St. John, the word of the dying Jesus or not, Elohim, Elohim, lama sabachthani, my God, why did you leave me? But it has been perfected. Philoition. This is the formula with which the mysteries at the Lepsis near Athens used to end. So this Greek interpretation of Jesus' life and death is brings him very near to the Greek mystery cults and throw away the relation to the Old Testament. It makes a difference whether you die with some psalm quotation on your lips or with some quotation from the Greek rituals. Alors, taking up once again my little power that has rested. On a much more large scale, the switch from Roman to Christian culture can be brought into one formula. The codex replaces the volume. The Greeks were, the Christians were very functional in changing the very material of or technology of writing and especially reading. And you have to imagine the classical Greek or Roman codex just like our toilet paper. That is to say, it's difficult to address lines which are not just in the center of your view, of your actual view. It takes you time to roll to the left or to the right. And the whole advantage of the codex is that you can leaf through. In normal cases, the codex production has been much more expensive. It's not just papyrus, it's parchment, that is the skin of dead calves or sheep, and chemically prepared, but then you can make up the bottle, make up a book as we know it. A book as we know it, in the sense that we know books as a plurality. The Jew may stay to their Torah and later the Muslims to their Quran, but the early Christians, since St. Ambrose and St. Augustine, prefer a plurality of books on their desktop. And the books can be left open. You have, on the left you have Homer, the Iliad, in the middle you have the Old Testament, on the right you have the New Testament, and then you leaf through the books and you compare, and what you do, you call making a concordance between pagan tradition, Jewish tradition, and gospel tradition. Naturally, in order to prove that the gospel Christian tradition is the best one and truest one and so on. But the strategical point is to insert the Christian fallacy or religion into this highly elaborated classical Greek and Roman culture. And after the takeover of the Christian church by the Roman emperors Constantine and his followers, the whole burden of Roman jurisprudence and bureaucracy fall down on the Christian culture and priesthood. And writing and reading of books and concordances becomes a way of risking one's own life. One mistaken phrase on the Trinity, and you can burn on a bonfire. Final point, final point. The command to mission the gospel among all peoples has produced the Cyrillic alphabets of Eastern Europe, of Bulgaria, Russia, Serbia, and the big divide between Latin Europe, European Community Europe, so to say, and the Orthodox rest of Europe, and all the tensions which are there for 2,000 years now. It's incredible how longue durée, how long-standing these writing technologies are efficient in their structure and dividing power. I've learned from Slavics, from scholars in Slavic languages, some very interesting information, which probably I'm getting further not too correct, but I try to do my best and very short. When these Christian missionaries entered holy motherly Russia, they met nymphs and elves and nixes and gods and goddesses and princes and princesses and frogs and all these changements, these metamorphoses from frogs to princes. This was very difficult for these one-God missionaries. They had no other word but the Slavic word to give to God. And so in order to distinguish the true God from the many wrong or false gods, they introduced diacritic signs, not for vocalic implications, but just for dividing between Christian and unchristian signifiers. This has given a very complicated orthography to the Russian script. Then Peter the Great has tried personally to reduce this complexity. Vladimir Ilyich Lenin has done what he could to simplify, and now obviously Russian is the only script where the difference between immanence and transcendence has been cancelled. So far, so much I learned from the scholars of Slavic languages. Except that you should see an ongoing process of copying classical Greek and Latin manuscripts by Christian monks and monasteries. And this process of copying is a very material basis of what we've got from classical antiquity. Many of these copies were unable to understand what they copied, and at first glance you'd say these were criminal copies. Second glance, you should thank them because they are much more faithful than copies believing to understand what they copy. Somebody who just draws what he sees without trying to interpret is more correct than people like me who already seem to understand or believe to understand. What's this mechanical office of copying, the only manual activity allowed to Benedictine monks, had a drawback, and a very obvious one. The abbé or prior could decide, no, this poem we shouldn't copy, just leave it out. We have books where place has been reserved to poets, for instance by Sappho, but the place has not been filled up by the poem. And this can't be the copy's fault, but some superior's fault who decided, oh, let's keep it. So the destruction of poetic manuscripts, Sappho and others, took place only at the end of the Byzantine epoch, which leaves us somehow some hope that we can discover here and there one more quotation in some monastery library overlooked up to now. So the end of Greek writing is no biological dying or fading. Thank you. biological end, no death, but the practical stop of an activity. Second, this was the second. One God, another third, single, unique God. The origin of the Quran, about 630 in Mecca and Medina, among rather rich nomads, rich because they controlled the pepper and mill routes between India, Indonesia and the Mediterranean culture. Muhammad married to a rich and much elder lady from Medina. Is taken away, was a spiritual attack, transported on Mount Hora near Medina, and the Archangel Gabriel shows up before his eyes with a piece of parchment, and Gabriel presents this written text to Muhammad's eyes and says, read. And Muhammad, that's not in the surah I'm quoting, this 96. Muhammad modestly answers, I can't read and write. But Gabriel is implacable and says, and repeats his command, read. And after some repetitions, nobody can withstand this angelic power. So Muhammad has been alphabetized in a record time and learned to read what Allah wanted for man, because following the same surah, Allah taught the use of the pen. This is obviously a competition, a competitive religion, given the functioning of Jewish, the scriptural, textual religion, given the functioning of the Christian, textual religion in the same geographical region. A third one of writing, of written religion tries to be introduced and respects only these two other older religions which have been written down. All other religions can be followed or destroyed or handled as superstitions. And for my friends in Arabian studies, I learned that the classical Islam was not at all interested in missionary activity. The Christian subjects should remain Christians and the Jewish should remain Jewish because they had to pay more taxes. This was more lucrative for the Caliph or Sultan than to make proselytes and Muslim subjects. What I can't explain, and what almost nobody has been able to explain, is the incredible speed and power with which the Islamic nomadic military force deployment came over the classical Mediterranean world from the Punjab up to Spain and Algeria and Morocco. Only 15 years after the revelation of the Archangel Gabriel in 641, the Caliph Omar in his tent received the general army who had just conquered the city of Alexandria and the library of Alexandria. And Omar asked, and General Omar asked to Nietzsche's joy, what should I do with the library, with all these thousands of books? And Omar, so they say, had this simple answer: oh, in case these books contradict the Quran, they are mistaken and should be burned. And in the worst case, if these books all confirm the Quran, they are redundant, superfluous, and should be burned. And in this legend, so it happened. In more historical truth, the biggest losses to the Library of Alexandria were produced by Julius Caesar in his occupation of the city. So Nietzsche liked this story, but we should stay more materialistic and hold track of the fact that with the occupation of Alexandria and the delta of the Nile, the whole supply of papyrus for the West European empires and kingdoms was destroyed, was cut up. The volatile and light medium of imperial intercommunication was at a loss. And the only writing material remaining, parchment, was ill-suited to command in time and speed, but well suited to transmit cultural contents from century to century. So Harold Innis, in the 50s of the last century, has explained the successful installation of a monasteric culture in the early European Middle Ages. back to the Arabic side of things, what struck me very much as interesting and important is the information I got that the classical Arab as a writing system was not propagated as primary medium, but as second language for worldwide understanding, as French in the European 18th century or English right now. So the different mother tongues between the Punjab and Spain had classical Arab as their intercommunication tools whenever they met. And the exclusion of vowels was not strict as it was in the Orthodox Bible, but facultative. If Persian poets try to render the beauty of Persian language and sound, they had many tools to write down the three long vowels A and I and U, and if it wasn't needed, you could skip it. So it was a flexible system between prose and poetry. Which I should study still more. And in this play between writing and making verses, something analogous happened as had happened in classical Rome. Among other writing demons, the Arab people or scholars invented was a demon called Kalaman, and Kalaman is obviously K-L-M, K-L-M, Kalaman. But by far the most important dimension I have to address before the second pause break is this intercultural impact of the Islamic culture, especially when, after it had turned from Mecca and Medina to Damascus and Baghdad. That is in the 8th and 9th century. Especially Baghdad became a world-leading place of translation between cultures and languages and scripts. The Greek writing, the Greek script as we know it, has been developed by Arabs in this time. The Greek minuscule system with accents and little dots. The distinction between learning by heart and learning by sense was obviously introduced. The Taliban were and are poor people who learn the whole Quran without understanding one single line, and in the madrasas you learn to translate into classical Arab or out of classical Arab. I heavily suspect that one of the origins of the medieval European university systems has been to sort there in the matrices. And finally, there was a caliph in Baghdad to whom Aristotle appeared in his dream. And Aristotle, in the dream of the caliph, said to him, I want to be translated. And this happened. So our whole corpus of Aristotelian texts has gone through the Arabian in the version. But the exchange worked in both directions, not just from west to east, from Aristotle to Baghdad, but also from the Punjab and from China to Baghdad. And this is probably historical, still more important. A certain Al-Khwarizmi, Tanya, could you? No Arab at all, but from the northeast Persian regions of Samarkand and Bukhara, came to Baghdad and brought the knowledge of Indian mathematics to the Arabs. The name Al-Khwarizmi, proper name, the man from Quadda, has gone through many falsifications and Latinizations, and finally showed up as algorithmus, probably. And then you could add next to algorithm, to algorithm, algorithm. Algorithm. An algorithm, hopefully you learned something about this marvelous invention, going back to the name of Al-Khwarizmi. It's some kind of mathematical rule of thumb. It's no equation, no theorem, no hypothesis. It's just a rule how we can do things in mathematics. At least this is a sense given to the word algorithm by Leibniz in 1684. One of the books of Al-Khwarizmi was called Algebra, which gave algebra, and it's just a collection of these algorithms, these rule of thumbs. You have, for instance, an equation like 3 plus 5, and you can write 3 plus 5 equals 8, or you can bring the 3 from the left side of the equation to the right side, and then you get 5 equals 8 minus 3. My make it so ill that I don't like to write here. Tanya, maybe you make it. Wollen Sie es anschreiben? Also ohne das Doppelzeichen, einfach untereinander. 2 bis 5 ist 8, und 5 ist 8, minus 3. Kommen Sie mit Wasser aufnehmen? Das kann ich nicht. Nein. Anschreiben.
I was talking to her.
That was this whole experiment in the break, during the break, my course on the, oh no, give me 1 other minute and the next break will take place. I started with Algebra as one of at least 2 books written by Al-Khwarizmi. The second one is, and Algebra just means this balancing of values inside an equation. You can what formerly has been left can be turned to the right, given the change of the sign, and the other way around. And this is as we still make it in mathematics. And the second thing was really the import of the Indian number system with including the 0. 0, 1, up to 9. This was a dramatic innovation. The Indian mathematical reasons are rather unclear. The only documented inscription are annual data, where the tens or the, let's say, numbers like 50,507 or so. That's the old text. It's a placeholder for the fact that there's no tens. If you would write it down in the same way as Greek little students wrote down their mathematical triads, the difference is rather minimal. In the Greek addition system, the carry takes place between 10 and 11. 10 has no carry and 11 has carry. And in the Indian system, the carry takes place between 9 and 10. 9 is a sum, has no carry, and 10 is a sum, is the carry itself. All this will constitute the High Middle Ages, to which we address our fading powers up to 1 o'clock. And we will get the dramatic moment of the invention of the printing press.
Everything there.
Yeah. I tried to, on this little
Japanese
pin, I wanted to make a little bit more transparent this meaning of algebra, of balancing the left and the right side of an equation. So you see the remaining, the constant 5 and the switching 3 and 8. And in doing so, in balancing, you balance, in fact, based on the value of 0. The difference between the right and the left side of all equations given must be 0. So 0 is a secret of all balancing of equations since algebraism. And that is why, in introducing you to the script systems of Christian European High Middle Ages, I can continue this little short story of the 0 in many disguises, or in some disguises. As this short story of 0 or break or nothingness or absence is not so speculative as in the case of Jacques. It's quite simple and sometimes has good military tests and reasons. I give you the facts and ask you for the reason. The Irish monks since 5 or 6 decades of research are famous for the invention of the spatium, of the space, of the spatium between words. Scriptura continua, the ongoing script, comes to an end, and the space is put between every word and its neighbor. So that Benoit Mandelbrot, in his definition what the word is in fractal sense, includes this space in the word's definition. It's just a style, I think. It's 2 or 3 months ago. But the curious fact, and the fact I would ask your opinion about, is that these early Irish monks introduced this space only when they copied Latin manuscripts and not when they wrote in their Celt Irish language good old Irish legends and sagas and myths. Any explanation possible? The space for, obviously, the space for them was a means of facilitating their understanding of a difficult foreign language named Latin. Why was it so difficult to them? Especially in Ireland, not in England, or not in France or southern Germany. You know, you should be silent. Please.
For the military, maybe. For the military, for the...
It has military reasons, yes, but it's just the other way around, so to say.
This was used for a cipher? Or
No.
Not yet.
Brilliant idea, cipher. For the,
They didn't.
yeah?
Was it the form, moving from a scroll to a book?
Could you say that again, please?
Or was it the form, something mechanical?
No,
Was it spoken or is it written?
it was written.
But did they speak Latin as well? I
It's,
don't know. I don't know.
Speak Latin.
They had difficulties in speaking Latin. That's why they introduced the space.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. Is that correct?
Yeah. And they had exceptional difficulties in related compared to other monasteries dispersed over Northern Europe, because no Roman soldier ever had entered the island of Ireland.
Britannia was a province since
Yeah.
the Roman Emperor Claudius had formed into Britannica, and I think until the year 410, the last legions, 407, the last legions stayed in Britannia. So
The legions were turned back or taken back in 407, I think. But every English monk had Latin in his ears, and the Irish monks had just to sublime their ignorance of Latin pronunciation by introducing this space. This is the current theory which I like.
And the Scots and the Welsh were still pagans.
Yes. Yeah, right. Except for Lindisfarne.
That's Northumberland though, that's not Scotland.
No,
No, that's Northumberland.
that's not Northumberland.
Yeah.
So let's stick with these last pagans of the of the heroic Scotch mountains and lakes. You know the history of missionary activities which didn't go on without difficulties. The first German monk trying to make up German verses explains in his Latin preface how difficult it was to take down, to transcribe the incredibly unclear vowels and palatals into the classical Latin alphabet. Gottfried von Weisburg gives rather disturbing and disgusting Latin instances of the atrocities of old German pronunciation. But in order to replace the songs addressed to Wotan and Thor, this is his explicit intention, he writes his poem on Christ's passion and death. These were phonetic problems, there were also semantic problems I shouldn't deal with. The Europe's big divide I mentioned already between Latin and Greek. As regards English, I like to stress the point made by Ferdinand de Saussure after the Battle of Hastings. The animals, the bigger animals, in English all had two names. They were calves, as long as they stayed on Saxon meadows, and they became real on the table of the Norman aristocracy, which is very unique among the European nations. But my job is to tell you the short story of the zero and the absence, and not the joys of the wheel on tables. After many centuries of neglect, the monks felt some necessity to note, to fix their monophonic song lines, the so-called Gregorian cantus or
chants. Gregorian chants.
Chants?
Yeah.
Chants, okay. These so-called Neumer were hints, little signs, meaning the next syllable should be rendered on the same pitch, on a pitch somehow higher, or thirdly on a pitch somehow slower. So the Neumann in German, Numata or probably in English, were relative notations, and as every relativism, prone to error. One monk misunderstood these steps as too high or too low or too... And so it was a cacophony which was tried to control, and as ever, the easiest way to control is pain. And so every musical error resulted in some rank. This painful musical culturalization came to an end when a monk named Guido of Arezzo in Middle Italy, would probably be standing from France, decided not to endure any longer these pains, these pranks, these sadistic musical educational techniques. And he invented our system. In Guido's time and case, just 4 lines. Nowadays, these are 5, as everybody of you know. And some key, changing key. And most important of all, every note is written either on a line or between 2 lines, in the space between 2 lines. This Guido makes it absolutely clear. This is the organizing principle of his new musical notation system. The space between 2 lines has become the place of B and C and A and every second note. And these are absolute values. no relative anymore. They produce no pain. And Guido is invited by his abbot to make the short trip from Arezzo to Rome, to the Vatican, and to propose this new musical system to his Holinity Pope. And the Pope, after 2 days of experimentation, discovers that he has learned to sing without any effort. And so Guido's invention becomes the official notation system for the inside the Catholic Church. All this remains in the monophonic realm of the Greek music, with some enlargements. And it is only in the 13th century, at the very height of medieval European culture, that polyphonic music is introduced, especially in France, especially in Paris, and before all, after the completion of the Cathedral of Notre Dame, Paris. And Paris is at the same time the place of polyphonic music and of the most advanced university system in Western Europe of the time. And so one of the friends and colleagues of St. Thomas of Aquin changes together with him from Cologne in Germany to Paris and writes the only medieval treatise that I have read, which is without any classical authoritative remark. It's just mathematical pureness without any allusion to culture and history and church and holiness. It just tries to make possible polyphonic music. Van Gogh of Köln is incredible. And as you may imagine, it's a short treatise because every sentence is a quintessence of 10 sentences. And one of the most brilliant statements is the omission of a tone is also a tone. Omissio toni, the pause, the break, the absence of sound is also sound. We can't compose polyphonic music without some stop for one voice and a stop for another voice. And so I would compare the space in writing, the zero in mathematics, and the pause sign in musica mensurata, as it was called, music measured in time, as equivalent expressions, if you allow me, of the same invasion of nothingness, absence, zero.